of learning and sharing and expressing what she experiences when she travels. And that makes it fun for me. So Eileen and I have known each other for over 25 years. In the chamber, she ran our Big Dulles Regional Chamber, and I was on the board and chairman, and we just got to know each other and have a good time together. We started a wonderful executive women's group, so I know some of you are with us tonight. This is a chance for you to get to see how Eileen can take you on a journey and tell the tales. She's so good at describing people and describing, in fact, she's taken this experience, this talent that she has for describing other people into a new career that's now she's helping people write their memoirs. Maybe your parents need their memoirs written. So this is her new arena. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. We're going to Turkey. Eileen, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Pat, and good evening, everybody. It is really nice to be with you tonight, and we're going to have one great trip. We're going to relive a trip that my husband Marshall and I took over 20 years ago to Turkey, but the memories are still fresh. I will say that it was a trip that began with a pretty dramatic moment, because there had been a huge earthquake that hit Turkey about 2 weeks before we were to leave. And as a result, about half of the tour group didn't show up. They just canceled. So we figured that the people that were with us were fairly intrepid, and we went along. And so in the middle of the night, my bed started to shake. We were having what I thought was another earthquake. But it turned out, when I talked to one of the staff of the hotel the next morning, we had just experienced an aftershock. But earthquake was how I entered Turkey. So in the morning, we went and had some breakfast, and I wanted to tell you what a Turkish breakfast is like. It's not quite the way we have ingredients. They will put out a spread of cheeses, feta cheeses, sheep's milk, goat's cheese, with breads and jam and olives and black tea. I thought they drank Turkish coffee for breakfast, but no, that's an afternoon drink. Oh, and it's funny, they have an expression that goes along with coffee, and it says, black as hell, strong as death, and sweet as love. So after breakfast, we were greeted by our host for the tour. His name was Omer. He had a very international background. He's a Turkish man, but he actually was a financial investor who worked for several years in Zurich, and he married a lady from Ohio. So we thought we were in good hands to cross cultures with him. And he started by telling us a story. Now, Pat accuses me of being a historian, and I accept the the title, I guess. But his story was really interesting. How did this city of Byzantium come to be? Well, there was once upon a time a Greek prince named Bezos, and he went to visit the oracle at Delphi. And she said, Bezos, you must find a ship and you must sail to the northeast and find a place where you can start a settlement. And so he did, and that became the city of Byzantium, which was founded back in 663 BCE. So here we were in modern day Istanbul. The city has changed names over the course of its history. From Byzantium, it went to Constantinople in the Middle Ages, and now, of course, it's Istanbul. It's a thriving metropolis of about 15 million people. It has the banks and the offices and all the trappings of any major city. But still, you know, its bones are incredibly old and I would say culturally stressed. Take clothing, for instance. You see the men, these days, they don't wear the red fezzes that they used to have in all of those old movies. They are in modern Western dress. But the women, about 50% of them are still wearing the hijab, which is the headscarf commonly seen in Muslim countries. So there is that little dichotomy going on. We got on the bus to take a tour of the city, and I'm going to show you what we saw. It was pretty amazing. This is the Turkey map of Turkey. Let me just pause for a moment. I'm sorry for the blurring. I couldn't come up with a version that did a clearer version, but I just want to point out, if you look at the upper left, you'll see a little slip of water, and that is where Istanbul is located. It sits across from Bulgaria and Greece. It's bounded by water. The Mediterranean Sea and the Sea of Marmara are on the bottom left, and the Black Sea is to the north, and connecting them is the Bosphorus Strait. So we went to see the city, and this was the skyline that we saw. Why is that not working? Let's see. Okay. There we are. Okay. This is the gorgeous, gorgeous skyline. It's a very dramatic view. It stretches for miles along the waterfront of the Bosphorus Strait. You can see ochre-colored buildings and Mediterranean red-tiled roofs, kind of stacked higgledy-piggledy. And on the opposite shore, you're seeing the spires with the domes and the turrets. It's a very exotic landscape. So our first day, we were there to see the Grand Bazaar. Now, let me tell you about the Grand Bazaar. This is an amazing place. It has 90 million visitors every year, and it covers about 4,000 shops spread across 61 streets. In the innermost part of the bazaar, you can find the precious wares like the jewelers and the crystals and the silks. But in olden times, and perhaps not so many years ago, the most picturesque section of the market, at least from my standpoint, was that of the shoe market. And why do you say, why was that so exciting? Well, there were thousands of shoes with different colors. So if you bought yellow shoes, you were buying them because you were a Muslim. There was blue shoes for the Greek Orthodox, black shoes for the Jewish people, and red for the Armenians. They had color-coded feet. I thought that was funny. So Marshall and I decided to find the Egyptian bazaar, which was noted for having foodstuffs. Marshall is a cook, and he loves to dabble in spices and herbs. And so there we were looking at these little dishes of oregano, red pepper flakes, little brown balls of nutmeg, and green mint leaves. Another shop had chickpeas for making hummus, sesame paste for tahini, and eggplants ready to roast for a baba ganoush. There was some ingredients for tabbouleh salad, and there were honey and orange blossom and rose waters for helping make baklava. All very yummy. So we had a long day walking through the bazaar. We were tired, having just come in the day before, and we had an early to bed. But the next morning, we were bright-eyed and ready for action, and our guide took us to a special place, one of the famous plazas in Istanbul called At Meidani. And I say it should really be called the Plaza of Thievery, because centered in the plaza is an ancient Egyptian obelisk of Thutmose III, a pharaoh, and it was stolen by the Emperor Theodosius, who had it moved to Constantinople. But what goes around comes around. This area had once hosted famous chariot races, and so Justinian had put in place 4 copper horses that overlooked the whole hippodrome. Well, when the Crusades happened, there was a tiff there with the Venetian forces. The Venetians grabbed the horses, and now they decorate the Plaza of St. Mark's over in Venice. So, going from the bazaar, and here's this is the Egyptian monument. It's very tall, made out of red granite. Beautiful shot of the quarter moon there. So the next stop after this was into the Basilica Cistern. We had to go down 52 stone steps into this very mysterious cathedral-like space. It's at the heart of the city's water filtration system, and it can hold up to 100,000 tons of water. It comes with more than 300 of these beautiful illuminated granite and marble columns that overlook pools. And as we crossed the pools, we could see fish swimming about, keeping the water clean, we were told. So in the afternoon, this is where we went. That is the Hagia Sophia. It is more than 1,500 years old. And for 1,000 of those years, it was the largest cathedral in the world. Over its long history, it has had 5 lives because it burned down or was bombed down 4 times. And it has housed 3 religious cultures. Before entering, our guide Omer told us a story. At the dawn of the 13th century, the Venetian Doge Dandolo had built a navy to assist the Jerusalem-bound crusaders, but their Byzantine cash turned out to be no good. This Doge, over 90 years old and blind, still had the spunk to want to get his money back. So he led the Latin Christians on a siege of Constantinople. And the city and Hagia Sophia were sacked and desecrated, and many of the golden mosaics were taken back to Italy, more thievery. Meanwhile, Dandolo, having recouped his losses, was later buried right there in the basilica. Apparently not one of their favorite tenants, I would say. So I'm taking you inside now.
Hey, Eileen.
Yes.
Would you, oh, hand went down. Joan, I thought Joan had a question for you.
Oh, Joan,
Keep
do you
on.
have a question?
No, she put her hand back
Okay,
down.
okay.
But,
All right.
but this is a good break, just to let the audience know that if you've got questions, use the Q&A box, or, oh, Joan has now raised her hand. Okay, here we go. Hey, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Joan?
Hmm?
You should be able to talk now.
I'm not hearing anything,
Oh,
Joan.
no, there she is.
When we went down into the cistern, they were having an art show. Did they have an art show when you were there? It was of eyeballs floating around on the water down there.
No, they didn't have it then. But that sounds like fun.
It was very
Was it the Turkish eye?
yes, it was the Turkish eye, and they were floating throughout the cistern.
Wow, that would be pretty special. Sorry, I missed it. All right, well, let me take you inside this wonderful Hagia Sophia. Is that not amazing? I just think that is a stunner. I think all of their architecture is stunning. So inside this space of grandeur it's filled with these forests of mosaics, stone inlays, bronze doors, marble columns. And I say the French are famous for food, the Italians for art, the Brits for theater. Well, I think the Arabs are famous for architecture. So what happened in the 14th century that was going to change the history of this famous cathedral? Well, the Black Plague had been a rapacious equalizer that killed almost half of Constantinople's inhabitants at mid-century. The city was severely depopulated, leaving the empire exhausted and ripe for conquest. And along came a brash 21-year-old named Sultan Mehmed, who had just come to the Ottoman throne, and he set himself the audacious task of conquering Constantinople. Well, he had a secret weapon. His army brought a new kind of weapon to their siege called gunpowder, something unknown to the defending forces. Constantinople and an empire of 1,500 years fell in just 53 days. Now, instead of destroying the numerous frescoes and mosaics on Hagia Sophia's walls, Mehmed had them whitewashed and plaster, and then covered them in Islamic designs and calligraphy. It would be so interesting to see those old walls, but the current ones bedazzle. So after a day at the various sites, we were ready for something that was soothing, and we decided to opt for entering a Turkish bath. So in former times, those baths actually were places of entertainment for dancing and dining and ceremonies, especially for the women. And they would come to the bath to celebrate weddings, high holidays, and newborns, or like we modern ladies, just to simply enjoy a beauty trip. So I had to pass into a large locker room where I was directed to strip, and I was given these wooden clogs to prevent me from slipping on the wet floors. And then the attendant gave me a lightweight cotton Turkish towel. We had to shower before moving into the adjoining room, where there were small windows and waves of steam that created this exotic half-light. And the temperature there was really hot. The heat was just rolling off the marble table in the center. So there were other bathers spread out along the floor, some in niches with fountains in corners. The bath attendant finally came over and got me back to reality by throwing buckets of warm water over me. That was then followed by a massage and a scraping of the skin that felt like baby soft skin then. Then I was directed to the open shower. And finally, I was invited to an adjoining room, now again dressed, where I could sip tea and have little desserts. So that is the experience of a Turkish bath. All right, the next day was amazing. We're going to take a trip to the Topkapi Palace. That's the tea that I was having after the bath. In fact, I have to show it off. Can you all see that I've got my little Turkish cup here? Does it show? No, it doesn't show. Wait, there. There's my tea today. All right, on to Topkapi. There it is. Isn't that beautiful? Quite large. It's sitting on this promontory overlooking where the Golden Horn and the Bosphorus Strait meet. And it was built by the Sultan Suleiman, the longest reigning sultan in Ottoman Empire history. But before we go there, I want to tell you a love story. Suleiman's mother once gave him a very special present, a 15-year-old slave girl. She had been captured in the area of Poland on one of the frequent raids made by the Crimean Tartars. And this young girl, who was said to be the daughter of an Orthodox priest, immediately captured his attention with her joyful spirit and her playful temperament. The West knows her as Roxanne, but he called her Harem, and soon she had captured his heart. Smitten, he ignored the royal harem protocol of one concubine mother, one son, a tradition designed to prevent both the mother's influence over the sultan and the feuds of blood brothers for the throne. Harem would bear 5 sons, and somewhere in the midst of begetting princes, Suleiman married Harem, making him the first Ottoman sultan to wed in 200 years. And for her, he built this palace. Now, palace here actually denotes a complex that stretches across 160 acres, and it's arranged around a series of courtyards. The first courtyard we went into had a grim name of the Fountain of the Executioners, not what you'd call a cheery welcome mat for many who passed through here. But there were also some treasures. There was the Spoonmaker's Diamond, which is the 4th largest diamond in the world. And if you're a Peter Sellers fan, you may recognize another treasure named the Topkapi Dagger. So we passed by beautiful gardens, an enormous kitchen, imperial stables, a cook's mosque, and sections that had evocative names such as the Elephant Garden, the Fig Garden, and the Circumcision Room. And farther along, we encountered the dormitories of a group called the Halberdiers with tresses. They were apparently an elite corps that distinguished themselves by wearing long hair. One room I remember especially, it was full of Qurans, and an imam sat on a stool before one of them, chanting its verses as we passed by. So now I'm going to take you into the heart of Topkapi and the gorgeous rooms that we saw there. This is the imperial throne room, and it's where the Sultan and the harem spent most of their lives. Now, in Arab culture, harem refers to both the Sultan's family and the space where his family lived. The architects had built in maximum privacy and discretion with the use of grilled windows and secret passageways. The space was opulent, but paired with a secluded, codified, and quiet daily life. The architecture and designs produced by the Arab-speaking artisans are perhaps the most beautiful ever created. I think so. Consider the Alhambra, consider the Taj Mahal, and then put Topkapi at the top of the list. These rooms that we are wandering were beyond exquisite. Here's another room. It's actually a courtyard. This was the hallway and courtyard of the concubines. These women, these concubines, would serve on duty in rotation and would collect the food brought by the eunuchs and serve the residents of the harem in a hierarchical order according to rank and title. They were guarded by eunuchs who came typically from the Central African territories of the empire. Now, the chief harem eunuch ranked 4th in power in the whole Ottoman Empire, something I hadn't known. And since they oversaw the Ottoman imperial foundations and the harem endowments, these empowered eunuchs were also very rich. I thought that was interesting. So we're leaving. No, I'm going to show you one more room of Topkapi before we go. This was a room where they sat to read. Again, I just think it's a stunning use of mosaic tiles and color and space. Just a sumptuous design. So, all right, we're going to leave there and we're going to go to a train station. This is the Sirceki district, perhaps best known as the site of the station for the old Orient Express that ran the Istanbul-Paris route. The Sufis believed that each person has a unique cosmic character with unique impediments to serving God, and therefore each must develop his or her individual plan for gaining grace. And through dancing, the Sufis seek the interconnectedness between both God and man and between mind and body. Steve, do we have this to show our guests a little video?
Yes, I think we can do that.
We're going to see just a couple of minutes worth of the Sufis entering the hall in which they would begin to dance, and we'll get to observe them in action. I just thought it was such a special thing that you would want to share.
Okay, and then while I'm pulling this up, if anybody has any questions or comments, don't forget you can type them into the Q&A by using the button at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hand and make a comment. And let me...
While you're finding that, I'll just tell the story that I got to see them again at the National Cathedral a few years ago. Oh, good. Here we go.
We're bumping into once a month, usually the last Sunday of the month. But check the website to make sure they're going to be here. About 40.
Don't worry about what he's saying. He's just introducing us into the room to see them.
This kind of whirling is a form of physical meditation. It is an 800-year-old tradition that was developed in the city of Konya. Essentially, it is a form of worship that has become a popular cultural attraction in Turkey.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And isn't that exotic beyond words? I just love them. So,
And Eileen, while you're loading up your slide again,
yes,
let's get Dennis on. He's got his hand raised.
okay.
Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Dennis.
For 20 years, my closest friend was a Turk. He moved over here on a soccer scholarship and decided to stay. And I really got to know a lot about Turkey. In fact, I was invited there a couple of times. Long wish I had gone. My number one goal to visit now is Istanbul. Do you know where the name Istanbul comes from?
No.
Well, between Constantinople, between Byzantium and Constantinople, for 1 year it was called Nova Roma. Then it switched to Constantinople after Constantine. But Istanbul is a corruption of the Greek words Istanpolis, to the city. And that's what the Turks would yell when they were going to storm the walls. And finally, in the early part of the 20th century, they renamed it to Istanbul. And then when Mehmed II conquered Constantinople, to show you how that part of the world has been conflict forever, he stood on a hill, and how they hold grudges forever. He stood on a hill, overlooked the city, and said, "Troy, you have been avenged." Now, Troy took place, what, 1,500 years earlier than that? And by the way, that cistern, is that cistern the same one that was in the movie From Russia with Love, when James Bond went underneath and it was a cistern full of water?
He did.
I don't know.
Yes,
Do you know,
he did.
Pat? It is. Okay, it is.
All right.
Thank you, Dennis.
And I one final thing. I had a wonderful opportunity with my Turkish friend to go down to the Smithsonian and see the great exhibit of Suleiman Kanuni, or Suleiman the Magnificent. It was spectacular.
He's quite a guy.
Spectacular.
Yes, thank you. Dennis is quite the historian too. I always learn something new from you, Dennis. Thanks for sharing.
And one comment has come in from Karen Magley. Are these pictures that you and Marshall took?
No, they are not. I don't take pictures.
And then just
But it is what I saw.
one quick note, Eileen, make sure you click that that little icon on the top left so that your screen is as big as it can possibly be. Remember the icon over there from that says from beginning, or no.
There we go.
current.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
All right. So after the Sufis, I want to take you to what is possibly the most beautiful church in the world, called the Blue Mosque. It's very blue. The term mosque is architecture conveying the spirit of Islam, and the Blue Mosque may be the quintessential Islamic building. The endowment of charitable institutions is an important aspect of Islamic culture. And in this spirit, Sultan Ahmed I decided to build his Blue Mosque. And it took just 7 years, opening in 1616 in the Christian era. If you notice those tall pencil-like spires, they were the special creations of Ottoman Turkey. They offered a geographical focal point for their congregations, but they also gave majesty to the skyline and served as a powerful visual reminder of their religion. So what you notice most is that there is an overwhelming beauty to the whole. Let's go inside. Again, quite the stunner. There are more than 20,000 handmade ceramic tiles in more than 50 different tulip designs filling the wall and the ceiling. At gallery level, their design becomes flamboyant with representations of flowers, fruits, and cypresses. Oh, and this is interesting. On the chandeliers, they put in ostrich eggs that were meant to prevent cobwebs inside the mosque by repelling spiders. I don't think I can show you one of those today, but I will show you a detail of one of the ceilings. Quite stunning. So our next foray was an evening on the Bosphorus. Now, the Bosphorus has been serving as a major commercial route for millennia. It connects the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and we wanted to experience it on an evening cruise. The water was still full of small boats and ferries crossing east to west, while some large tankers and the tour boats were gliding north into port or heading downstream into the southern waters. You could see these long and luxurious wooden Turkish gullets passing us by. And the sun was just setting, and we were just about to depart when cries were overheard. They were echoing above us, and it was the muezzins announcing a call to prayer that was ricocheting across the Bosphorus. It was a special moment. The beauty of the shoreline has many beauties to see. Here's one. That's the Romelian fortress, actually, before I get to the palaces. That was used as a place of imprisonment during the First World War for the people from the embassies of countries that were at war with Turkey. But here is one of their extravagant buildings. This is the Dolmabahce, pardon my pronunciation. For a long time, this building served as the administrative heart of the Ottoman Empire. Here's another. this is the Sirceki Palace, and it was built during a period when the sultans went on a building spree. Today it has been refitted as a luxury hotel. So as we approach the Golden Horn, one of the city's most striking landmarks will come into view. But I wanted to just show you how the lie of the waters are here. Heading to the upper right is the Bosphorus. Below is the Marmara Sea, which flows into the Mediterranean, whereas the Bosphorus is going north into the Black Sea. And that's the Golden Horn that we see in front of us. So at its tip is, isn't that stunning? Oh, it's beautiful. I'd like to be there right now. That's an evening on the Bosphorus. This is the Galata Tower, which is seen from the water, and it's one of the iconic landmarks of the Bosphorus Straits. So that's Istanbul. I'm going to take you to another part of Turkey now, and it's an incredible place that we're going to travel to. You know, Turkey, we think of today as a Muslim country, but it's also the place where Christianity was born. And it wasn't born in Byzantium. It wasn't born in Jerusalem, Rome, or any of those famous places. It came out of Tarsus with St. Paul. It came out of Antioch, where the name Christianity was first used. It codified itself at Nicaea with the Nicene Council a few centuries later. So as we leave Istanbul, heading into central Turkey, we're going to go into a strange land called Cappadocia, sitting in the central part of Turkey. And it was home early on to holy men who became known as the Desert Fathers in the Christian tradition. And it's from them that the whole monastic tradition was born. And this is the country that they saw. There had been millions of years ago, enormous volcanic eruptions that left soft sedimentary rock formations, and they somehow became these otherworldly landscapes of pillars and pinnacles, minarets, mushrooms. These were in front of you are the fabled fairy chimneys, eons old stone miracles, I call them. And one of the things that was special about the day that we traveled into this land was that from the bus, I suddenly saw movement on the hillside, and there was an old man leading a donkey down the narrow path, and it was like a vision from another time. The duo was moving slowly. They were like specks on a rocky slab that was pitted with caves. It was quite a special moment. So this Cappadocia, it's sat astride the historic Silk Road, which was the trading route of the Middle Ages. And unfortunately, it was unhappily positioned on the boundary between ancient rival empires. So century after century, this area got raided and invaded by a who's who of empire builders. The Hittites were there, then came the Persians, after them the Greeks and the Romans and the Byzantines and the Ottomans. They all wanted to lay claim to this land at one time or another. So what is the people to do if you're living in Cappadocia? Well, they were resourceful types, and they realized that the land that they were on was soft and that they could dig themselves underground. And so they created underground cities. This is a slice of one of the cities. These places had storerooms, living quarters, places of worship, stables, all dug out of this soft stone. And some of the rooms had low ceilings, and we had to stoop walking through them. Some of them were shaped like beehives. And the air there, it was slightly musty, almost chalky. these tunnel complexes actually came to form entire towns with as many as 8 different stories hidden underground. Each could shelter thousands, and some of them even acquired names. So here's one exhibit of the tunnel-esque type room. Yeah, and you just marvel that they could do this. So when the warring was over, the monks got to building churches amid the cliff walls, and so we went to climb some of these hills and see some of the beautiful art that was found in these rock-hewn churches. These were interiors filled with Byzantine paintings, brightly portrayed in reds and greens, and above all, gold. There is a restored version. Isn't that lovely? Okay, so going from the sacred to the secular, Turkey's most famous visitor from the Silk Road was the lowly silkworm smuggled out of China, perhaps as early as 550 Christian era. Its arrival launched 1,500 years of carpet making in Turkey. We visited the carpet shop that came with a tour. It began outside with a demonstration of the care of the silkworms that spin these delicate cobwebs. Then at another station, we watched workers dipping the threads into the natural plant dyes. And passing on, we saw ladies in colorful dress weaving, knotting, and snipping the dried strands into ancient motifs, squares filled with stars, rhomboids filled with stylized flowers and leaves. And then we were invited inside, where our host directed us to these comfortable cushions and served us tea while they literally rolled out the carpets. And of course, we signed up for a couple. So it's interesting to hear different versions of old stories. According to Eastern Christianity, Mary as a child was consecrated at the age of 3 to serve as a temple virgin in Solomon's temple. Zechariah, at that time the high priest of the temple, did the unthinkable and carried Mary into the Holy of Holies as a sign of her importance, implying that she would become the ark in which God would take form. The story goes on to say that at the age of 12, she was required to give up her position and marry, although she herself desired to remain forever a virgin in dedication to God. So the priests found a compromise and decided to marry her to a close relative, an older man, one who would take care of her and allow her to retain her virginity. Saintly Joseph was finally chosen. So why am I telling you this story? It's because we're going to Ephesus. Oh, and there's the, let me back up and just tell you this story before we go on to Ephesus. One night after the carpet show, I decided to take a walk by myself down a side street. I just wanted to see a little bit of the neighborhood and get a sense of this wonderful, so different neighborhood than anything I had seen. And along came a lady dressed like this woman, all in black, carrying her bag, almost slumping along. It was obviously a heavy bag, but it just seemed so amazing that in the 21st century, you would find a scene like that. I just remember her for being so different. Anyway, here we are in Ephesus. This is the outer building, and this is where Mary supposedly lived her final years. Some say that it was St. John the Evangelist who helped her flee into the Turkish lands. And the house was built for her on a hill outside of Ephesus, where she stayed until her death. This refurbished stone building still looks exceedingly old. Its construction is rather small, although it's now surrounded by some other buildings and gardens. Outside there's a faucet, and its waters are reputed to have powers of healing and fertility. And just beyond it, we passed a particular wishing wall in which on which modern pilgrims have been leaving notes of petition and praise. Here's an inside look. This is the altar that Mary's table is honoring. So after the visit to Mary's house, we wandered back down the hill into the center of ancient Ephesus, and we could wander around. I remember that there were churches and theaters and marketplace, an old chapel. But what I will remember always from Ephesus, I was positively awestruck in front of this facade. That is the ancient great library of Celsus. Celsus was a Roman senator, and this was his mausoleum. Today, only the front exterior facade remains, but it is spectacular. The library was said to store 12,000 scrolls, and in its day, it was one of the most impressive buildings in the entire Roman Empire. So that is where I concluded my trip with Marshall through Turkey, but we have something special in store still. So at this point, I'm going to turn the program back to my friend Pat, and she's going to take you on a different kind of journey.
We're going bareboating, so I'm going to take off my jacket. This is an actual jacket that my father, when he with his business partner in Ankara, brought back for my mother. We had lots of souvenirs, including, you mentioned daggers. Oh, I have a whole collection of daggers and swords I don't quite know what to do with. Tried to promise my cousin he could have them if he wanted, but.
Hey, Pat, I'm glad you brought up clothing. Joanne Schaub had a question for Eileen. Did you have to wear a head covering?
No, I didn't have to wear one.
I did in every throughout Istanbul, in every palace, yes. In fact, I have a picture of myself wearing a head covering. I thought it was one of the people that lived there because I didn't recognize myself. But they're actually, and we did the same thing, but without a tour. We were on our own with Dave's best friend Bob and Vicky, and we traveled around, but we were there to sail. We were there to go bareboating. So we went through Istanbul and we're just awestruck with all the beauty, and we loved Ephesus, and Mary's house was very emotional for me. But let's see if I can show you where we start. And this is just about 2 minutes. Yes. Now what do I do, Steve? Share. Okay. Oh, here I am. Okay. So we went bareboating, and if you're not a sailor, you might not know what bareboating is. How do I? Now it's not rolling.
Use the arrows.
I'm using
use the arrows on your
arrows.
I'm using the arrows on my laptop. I'm using the scroll. Oh, there we go. Okay. This started on the south coast. Eileen showed you the map, and we started at the very bottom of Turkey to the east, and we sailed west. We started in Marmaris, and this is the type of sailboat we had. There were 4 of us on board. We bareboated, which means you run the boat yourself. You can get a captain. It's wonderful sailing. There were days when it was hot and there was no wind, so we also had to have a good motor. And then a lot of people actually went traveling by Turkish Gulet, G-U-L-E-T. Beautiful, beautiful wooden boats that take passengers around small groups of cruisers along the Aegean, which is where we were sailing. And when you sail, you can see some coast in the background. When you sail along the Turkish coast, you're between Turkey and Greece. So you see the Grecian islands as well, which a lot of people want to visit those at the same time. It's very rocky. Here's a family that were cooling off all together. I love that picture. The Aegean coast of Turkey is called the Turquoise Coast, so you can see why. And this is a little village. We went in to get out of the heat, to get under cover and have a little lunch and lay back on some pillows, just like you saw. And there was a lady actually weaving thread, weaving the silk and dyeing it with natural fibers that they were growing there. It really was not commercial at all. It was just a little village enterprise with a family that were making beautiful rugs. And we ended our bareboating trip in the city of Bodrum. And this is some of Bodrum. It's a very jet set city, very interesting small city to visit in Turkey. And from there, we went on up to Ephesus, as Eileen said. But we were traveling on our own, which is also possible to do in Turkey. We didn't have a problem with the language, even though we don't speak Turkish. So this really is the end of the presentation. And what happens at the end of the presentation? Well, I don't know if Steve has it, but we remind you that if you like some of these stories, there are lots more in the book called Rome. And you can't just ask for Rome because there are a billion books called Rome. This is Rome Mindful Adventuring Across the Globe. So you almost have to put in Rome Mindful because we haven't gone into that. Maybe when we get to our chapter on experiencing living in a Buddhist monastery, we get a lot more into mindfulness. But that is a book, and it's available everywhere. If you like a bargain, I would get it from the publisher, which is Lulu, LULU.com. We want to thank Steve. He's been fantastic. There it is. If you've ever heard of Surf Reston, we're talking about surfboards, paddleboarding. This is a wonderful enterprise that Steve has started in Reston, Virginia. And so when he's not helping save the world for elderly people, he's also giving people yoga on surfboard lessons and helping when we have races, some of our 5 lakes in Reston, helping with the surfboards to be surf patrol. He also does ski patrol. He's a big cyclist. He's a very active guy. So we love Steve. Everyone loves Steve, and we're so grateful for how he's gotten things started. And he's decided that he'd be happy to intern. Our daughter Erin's friend Ashley Brown was one of the beta readers of our book and an author in her own right. So that would be lovely if she could help him to take over this job that he set up so beautifully for us. Okay, did I get everything, Eileen? Can we get to the party part?
Thanks, Pat. Well, actually, here, before we get to that, let's go through some of the questions that have queued up, and then we can do that. So Teresa Rutledge says, do you have recommendations for a historical fiction book that takes place in Turkey? And I would also say that's a great one for the attendees. So if anybody has a recommendation, type it into chat.
Yeah, I'd like to know myself. That's a great question. I don't have the answer, but I'd love to have it. So okay. If anyone knows.
Georgia Graves says, when did Eileen go to Turkey and when did Pat go to Turkey?
So hi, Georgia. We were there in 1999, 21 years ago.
Uh-huh. I feel like it was after that, but I'm not sure. I don't know if Bob's on the line. He's Dave's friend up in Nova Scotia.
And Teresa says, I was in Turkey working with the Central Bank of Turkey employees around 2002. It was against the law for women to wear any kind of headscarf. I understand it is still like that for public sector employees. An interesting observation.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So Teresa, I will share a story. When we were there, there was a bank run going on. And everybody would run to the bank every morning to queue up and take out their money because it would lose half its value by the next 24 hours. It was horrible.
That's great. Joan Nam says, when we were in the Topkapi Palace, the room with the jewels, most of the jewels were dull. When we returned to the States, those jewels were on display at the Corcoran. They were beautiful after being cleaned up. Wonder if anyone saw the exhibit.
Wow.
We have an answer on a book. Orlan Pahaks. I'm murdering that name. What is the name, Bill?
Orhan Pumak.
Istanbul. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's also right above that in the comments section. This is for everyone. Do you have any recommended guided tours for legally blind people?
Huh.
We could do some research.
We don't, but we have a wonderful, I don't know where you are, but we have a wonderful organization in Reston for people who are blind or visually impaired. And they're fantastic with the resources. I'd be glad to ask them if you want to contact me.
Great, that's Janice. So, well, that gets us through the questions. So, oh, let's see. It says, do you know the Joanne says, do you know the significance of the lower bark on trees being painted white as observed in the photos?
No.
I thought it was for insect control, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. So now, as Pat had said, we move to sort of the final networking, the fun part, where you can reveal yourself if you like. And what you do is just press the raise your hand button, and we'll move you over to the panelist side. And then you can, if you want to show your screen, that's great. And if you don't, that's great too. And so just raise your hand. I moved, who did I move over there? Joanne and Lori and Georgia. And while I'm doing this, Pat, you know, you brought up the paddleboarding.
Yes.
I don't know if we'll have paddleboarding this summer with, you know, that's one of the things that'll be really difficult for us to do, to run the paddleboarding business.
Mm.
And you have to ride the ski lift one person at a time, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting for a lot of activities like that.
But everybody's getting a bike, so that's good.
Well, everybody's buying bikes and buying paddleboards. So,
Mary Dunbar?
So.
I wanted to give a shout out to my cousin Joan Eckel, who's joining us from New Jersey. And I haven't seen you in years, Joan. How are you? Thank you for joining.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to go over to that side, just raise your hand, guys, and I'll bring you over.
And Natasha, are you still there? She used to live in right here.
Yes, I'm here.
Tennessee. There she is. Hi, Natasha.
Former New Yorker, former Virginian, yes.
Pat, I'm wearing my DePaul 63
Oh, all
hat.
Right.
I found it in the back of the closet today.
We all dress up for the show in our different ways, don't we, Mary?
Yeah, because Pat's from DePaul. Cool. She and I graduated together.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, has anyone been to Turkey? Lori went. When did you go, Lori?
Almost.
We went in 2008 as part of a Mediterranean cruise, and one of the stops was in Ephesus, but we only got to spend a day there. But we also got to visit the home of Mary, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
And as I recall, there was also an area there where St. John lived, or because John had brought her to Ephesus, and he remained in the area too, I believe, for a while.
Okay, good.
But it was beautiful.
Sheila, hi, Sheila.
Hi.
You've been to Turkey.
Hi, Sheila.
I've been to Turkey. Hi, Pat. I've been to Turkey many times. My husband used to have a business partner over there, and we would go at least 3 times a year, starting in the 90s and ending about, I think maybe the last time I was there was about 7 years ago.
Do you have a favorite place to go?
And, all of it, because I've been almost everywhere. There's one place, well, there's 2 places I would like to go. I have not been on the Black Sea, which has the best baklava in the world because it has hazelnuts instead of pistachios or walnuts. It's to die for. And there's another place, I can't remember what it is, but it's kind of a goofy place my daughter wanted to go to. I wanted to say something. Ataturk actually forbid head coverings. A woman couldn't work, and that's when we're allowed to go to work, but they couldn't work, they couldn't go to school with a head covering. Absolutely forbidden. Men were killed under Ataturk if they refused to take off their beard, if they went around with the fez on. Men were, what he did was he had a very gentle way of persuading them. He dropped them out of an airplane.
Oh my.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Evelyn,
You have a lot of very lovely, acceptable
Did you
history.
know
I
Mary
would love to get together with you and give you some of my history.
yeah, we have to talk, because my father had a business partner, Turkish.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I went there just for work, and unfortunately, I was just there a short period of time and left. And this was, 2002, and a few things stuck out in my mind. I was teaching to people, my peers over there, who are bank supervisors, which is what I do. So it was government to government, and we let the class out one afternoon because Turkey was in the World. One of the game, they were playing one of the games that was leading up to the World Cup, and it was unbelievably exciting.
Pandemonium, huh?
Oh, everybody was just so much excitement, and everybody was waving the Turkish flag. And the other thing I really remember about that trip is just thinking about where Turkey sits geopolitical. And so this was a U.S. government sponsored trip, and how important they are strategically. And but then, that's the case, but then they were, I'm not sure the case anymore, being considered to be part of the European Union. And they had, many Turks had told me that they were discriminated against. And I actually saw that when we flew through Germany, and the plane full of Turks was held to the side, and I hope it's not like that anymore, but I mean, it were just interesting observations about how they fit in the world scene. It's a yes.
Who was that? What year were you there?
I think it was 2002. I know it's been a while. It's been a while. I guess I could probably Google World Cup. So it would have been a year they had the World Cup, and that they did well. I don't remember, but I came home with all kinds of really cool Turkish red shirts and Turkish flags, and
they did.
Were there? Okay, somebody is saying Bill Canis. Okay, so it was 2002. You were there. Oh, well, maybe we saw each other or something.
Hi, Jim and Ev. Hi, Jim. I like your beard. Can you hear me?
He has to turn his microphone off. On.
Yeah.
On.
You're muted.
Now you can.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Now. Yes.
I'm jealous. This turkey movie was great, and I wish I'd have been on it. It's better than the Sarasota Surf and Racket Club in 1973.
Oh, that was our last reunion.
It was great tonight, girls. I so enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. It's good to share one's memories with other people.
Yes. The Paw family, AKO. Hey.
That program was really good. Yeah. And I had heard some stuff about Turkey and Ephesus and the homes that were up in those, they look like anthills almost.
Yes.
And it's just amazing how they lived and how they got along, and to think that they had underground cities and everything. The world is really interesting.
It is.
Pat and Evelyn, do you remember when we were in school, there was a Turkish foreign student. His name was Aki Ogelman.
Oh, I do.
Do you remember Aki?
I do remember him.
And he was so adorable. And I've always wanted to go to Turkey ever since I met Aki Ogelman.
Seems to me he was a friend of the Omans, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he was an ATO or not, but I think possible.
It's a Phi Psi, I think.
Oh, he's a Phi Psi.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I should have known him.
Amazingly, we have 3 people on here who were in college together.
Yes.
Years ago.
We do.
We get
And
more.
Brad,
Invite the
the same class.
In the same class. And actually, Pat and Mary are my friends. And through me, they got to see each other again.
And we have been
That's
at,
a coincidence. Yeah.
I've always thought that travel was the best education you can get.
yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
My first trip abroad was during the summer of my going into senior year college. And I remember coming back saying, that's the best education I will ever get, because it taught me several things, like the news was different and not always to be believed from our side. But importantly, we're all human beings. And it was a lesson I tried to bequeath to my children. I made them go abroad a lot.
Unfortunately, after school, I had to fight a war.
Yeah. On
Yeah.
the other side of the world. Yeah.
Well,
My dad was in that situation. He said he was never going back to Europe, so my mom didn't get to go. Too bad.
So where's our next travel trip to?
oh,
Oh,
what are our polls? Steve, are
we
you
have-
still there?
Steve, did we put a poll
Oh.
up?
Hold on here. I hope that people can take this because, oh, yes, I can make it so everybody can take it. Okay, so
Okay.
Okay.
here is, where would you like to go next?
All right.
Mallorca.
No.
You have to send a message if you want to go somewhere that's not on the list.
Machu Picchu. I'd like
But-
to visit.
But one of the things that Pat and Eileen would like to do is maybe get some of you guys or your friends on to talk about your travels too, to different places.
Mhm.
Good idea. Kenya and Tanzania.
Well, you could always try Bloomington, Indiana.
We're supposed to check this now? Okay.
Yeah, check it now and I'll show you the results.
Yeah.
Can we only pick one? Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, I
There's
think the
several
next,
sessions. It's a matter of where do we go next. We will get all of them.
We'll get all the places.
okay,
Can I
so
ask-
It is really interesting. They have music and art and the aspen trees and the mountains and everything. It's really neat.
So we'll see what the results are, though.
Oh,
Santa
good.
Fe wasn't.
Okay.
It was the monastery in Kathmandu.
Kathmandu. And we kind of guessed that might be the next one. So,
Can I ask Evelyn and her husband a question?
yeah.
Sure.
They're in Bloomington, Indiana,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
not Illinois.
Right,
Indiana.
Indiana.
Okay. You're near Washington?
Not too far, probably about an hour northeast of Washington, Indiana. Sarah Richards. You remember Sarah Marks? Did you? Sarah
No.
Marks is from Washington.
I know Rich and Mary Jo Smith in Washington, Indiana, but in the Illinois one, I thought maybe you worked for State Farm and you might have known a friend of ours.
No, we're in Indiana. We're just south of Indianapolis. I mean, 50 miles.
Ziba Graham was from there.
But are you talking about? You're talking about Washington, Indiana?
Washington, Indiana, but then
Yeah.
we have friends. The first I saw the Bloomington, and thought it was.
There's a Bloomington, Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah. Wrong place. Okay. Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
I have a suggestion on a writer who's written several books about Turkey named Barbara Nadel, Nadel. She's a British writer and she's written several books, Harem and Balthazar's Daughter. They're about a Turkish detective and very well written, taking place in Istanbul.
All right. All right.
One of my best buddies was a helicopter pilot and was head of the big air base there in Turkey. And one of his jobs was to take the senators that would come over to see Turkey. He says all of them wanted to go see Ephesus, but he'd take them to all those places you've been talking about.
Great. Well, it has always been a pleasure to be with you singly and now collectively. So we have a new group, and we will be going to Kathmandu next week. It looks like from the survey polls here, into the mountains of the Himalayas, and meeting with a very different kind of tradition. I always wondered what it would be like to spend time in a Buddhist monastery. What did they do all day? Well, I found out. And we're going to tell you.
Did you know we have a Tibetan monk here in Bloomington, Indiana?
Good.
Yeah, a temple, and the Dalai Lama has been here several times, and his brother used to teach at IU in the language department.
At Indiana University, yeah. I'm sorry I missed the Dalai Lama. I would love to have seen him. He was in India when we were.
All right, so Pat, what are we going to do about the time for next week? Are we on for 5:30?
Steve, we had another poll too about.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I forgot. Hold on a sec. This is,
When
wait,
the
hold on.
pandemic started, we thought that
Wait, no, hold on.
we couldn't go anywhere on Friday nights. So we decided that we'd do it on Friday night. But then some people said, oh, that's not so good for me. So let's see.
Wait,
I think it's kind of counterintuitive to ask the people who are here whether they can do Friday night.
I think so
Well,
too.
No, I added Friday night to the polling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We put out some other suggestions, and we may not make a change right away. We'll see kind of how things are trending. But if you want to cast a preference for another time or day, we would appreciate it. Maybe we'll
Send us your comments, good and bad. We're looking for constructive criticism as we build this operation. And thank you for being such good travelers. We love having you along.
I was going to say, I thought it was great. You did a lovely slide presentation, and the was just sprang up from the screen. It was wonderful. Thank you.
It was absolutely wonderful. Very, very good, and a lot of work went into that.
Yeah, it's well worth it. Eileen, one of the choices is not Friday at another time, although I think there was noon. Friday at 5:30 is not a bad time.
I don't think so either.
Yeah,
I think it's
just click that. I made sure that I kept that in here.
Right, but what I was going to say is Friday at 7 or 7:30 would be much better because
after dinner.
It would be after dinner time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hear you. We had envisioned it originally as cocktail time.
Cocktail hour, yeah.
Cocktail hour.
Well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
Yes, that's what I'm doing anyway. But yeah, no, this time's better for me. 7:30 is not possible, but that's okay.
Well, here,
I can watch it later.
I'll share the results there.
All
So
right.
it's pretty much
Keeping it the same.
It's the same. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
I guess the question is that whoever else wants to join in, if they would agree that that's the best time for them. I think you're right about the polling. It's probably a little skewed.
We'll run it again next time.
It works for all of us. Yeah.
I think we get really professional feedback. We love it. So keep it coming.
We can always prepare a cocktail ahead of time.
Yeah.
And we do have recordings of these, so that if there's somebody you know who would like this to see it, the link
That would
is
be,
up, right?
I'd like to see that again, actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll be included in the next email.
Okay.
Get a thumbs up for this one.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
the others are good too.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone. Love you all.
Thought it was good.
Mhm.
Yeah.